It was the fall of 2023, the night I thought I could finally disappear into the background, just like I always used to. But that night I was wrong, because the one man I once helped in secret, now one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, stood up in front of everyone and called me his mentor. Crazy, right? The same people who used to call me the ugly, stupid sister suddenly couldn't even look me in the eye. And trust me, I didn't see it coming either. But let me take you back. Because what led to that moment wasn't luck. It was years of silence, humiliation, and something darker. Something that can break even the kindest heart. They say time heals everything, but sometimes time just hides the scars better. And mine, well, they started a long time ago. Back when my sister was the golden child, and I was the family embarrassment. Every insult, every laugh, every reminder that I was never enough, built a wall between us. Funny thing, though, people forget that walls can also protect you. From them. I remember sitting in that reunion hall, the same faces I grew up around, pretending to smile, pretending they didn't remember the way they used to mock me. But what none of them knew was that the girl they laughed at once held the key to someone's future. And that person, well, he was about to turn their perfect little world upside down. So before we go any further, hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's proof that sometimes the one they break is the one who learns how to rebuild. Growing up, I learned early that some people are born to shine, and others are born to make that shine look brighter. My sister Lila was the kind everyone adored, beautiful, confident, clever, the kind of girl who never had to ask for attention. It just followed her like sunlight. And me, I was the shadow that came with it. The quiet, awkward one. The one who always had a stain on her shirt, a hair out of place, or a question that made people laugh. I used to think it was normal, that every family had a favorite. But when your own mother sighs in disappointment every time you walk into a room, you start believing you really are the mistake. Why can't you be more like your sister? That line became the soundtrack of my life. At school, it was the same story. Lila was the star, cheerleader, debate queen, prom favorite. I was just her sister. Teachers remembered me as her dull copy. Classmates used me as a punchline. You'd think you'd get used to it, but humiliation doesn't fade. It stains. There was this one time, a school talent show. I'd practiced for weeks, writing this small poem about kindness. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The moment I walked on stage, laughter echoed before I even spoke. Lila's friends were in the front row whispering. I made it halfway through before my voice cracked, and someone yelled, "Don't worry, Lila, your sister tried." The whole auditorium burst into laughter. Everyone, except one boy in the back. He didn't laugh. He just watched, quietly, like he saw the pain no one else cared to see. When I stepped off stage, my mother said, "You really shouldn't embarrass yourself like that." No comfort. No hug, just disappointment. I didn't cry then. I waited until the lights were off and the house was quiet, then buried my face in the pillow so no one would hear. By college, I stopped trying to prove anything. I worked nights at a diner to pay my bills while Lila lived the life everyone envied. She had charm. I had calluses. She had admirers. I had a pile of receipts and aching feet. And yet, deep inside, there was this small voice, a stubborn whisper that said, "Don't give up." Not yet. But every time I took a step forward, they found a way to remind me who I was supposed to be, the nobody. "Oh, you got a job? How sweet. Lila's moving to New York. You lost weight? Good for you. Lila just got engaged." It was endless. So I learned to disappear. If they couldn't see me, they couldn't hurt me. And in that silence, I started to see them. Really see them. The fake smiles, the jealousy, the lies they told each other to feel better. I learned to read people, to understand pain, to listen when no one else did. And maybe that was the moment my story quietly began, in the loneliness. Because when no one believes in you, you either break or you build something they can't take from you. I didn't know it then, but those quiet years, those nights spent feeling invisible, were the foundation of everything that would come later. It was the winter of 2012 when my life quietly shifted. No grand moment, no sudden miracle, just a slow, almost invisible turn in the road. I was 24, working late shifts at a small bookstore near campus. The kind of place that smelled like old paper and loneliness. Most nights it was just me, a flickering lamp, and the sound of rain against the windows. That's when he started coming in. Always near closing time. Daniel. He looked tired, worn down, like the world had already taken more from him than he had to give. A coffee in one hand, a notebook in the other. He never talked much at first, just browsed the business section, wrote something and left. One night, as I was stacking books, I asked, "You studying for something?" He smiled faintly. "Trying to build something, actually. A company. I remember thinking how strange that sounded, coming from a man in a thrift store coat and shoes with holes. But there was something in his voice, this quiet fire, the kind I hadn't heard in anyone for years. Not even in myself. He started coming by more often, sometimes asking my opinion about ideas. I knew nothing about business, but I knew what failure looked like, and I could see he wasn't one. Just lost. Broke, yes, but not broken. I lent him a few books, helped him research, even made him sandwiches when I found out he was skipping meals to save money. My sister would have laughed herself sick if she knew. Helping some random guy build his dreams? You really don't learn, do you? But something in me wanted him to win. Maybe because if he could rise from nothing, then maybe, just maybe, so could I. One evening, he confessed he'd been kicked out of his apartment. He looked humiliated even saying it. Without thinking, I offered my couch. He refused at first, but I could tell he needed a place. So for 2 months he stayed, quiet, polite, focused. We'd talk late at night about the future, about how people like us had to work twice as hard just to be seen. I never asked for anything, but one night, as he was scribbling ideas, he looked at me and said, "You know, you see things differently. You see people—" "That's rare." I didn't know how to respond, so I laughed it off. But something about that sentence stayed with me. No one had ever said I saw anything valuable before. Then one day, he left. Said he found an investor in another city and wanted to give it a real shot. He hugged me once tightly and said, "I'll make it count." And then he was gone. No calls, no letters. Just gone. Months passed. Then years. I moved on, or tried to. My life stayed small but stable. I worked hard, paid my bills, kept my head down. My family barely noticed, and I'd stopped expecting them to. Sometimes I'd wonder about Daniel, if his big dream ever worked out. But I'd always shrug it off. People move on, right? Still, some nights when the world went quiet, I'd think about that flicker of belief he had. And how it had rubbed off on me without me realizing it, because after he left, I started taking night classes. Business, marketing, writing. Little by little, I rebuilt myself. No applause, no spotlight, just quiet progress. Funny thing, people think change happens all at once, but it doesn't. It sneaks up on you in silence, disguised as small choices. And looking back, I realize now, Daniel didn't just walk into that bookstore by accident. He was the mirror I needed, the reminder that even the forgotten ones can change someone's life. What I didn't know back then was that the man I'd once given a couch, a meal, and a little faith would one day walk into a room full of people who'd mocked me and make them listen to my name. For a long time after Daniel left, life was just routine. Wake up, work, study, sleep, repeat. Nothing dramatic, no sudden twist of fate. Just quiet effort. But sometimes that's exactly what changes you. The slow, steady burn instead of the explosion. I started taking online business courses at night, using an old second-hand laptop that froze every 10 minutes. I'd sit there with a cup of cheap instant coffee, watching lectures about marketing, finance, and psychology. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to keep feeling small. Every new thing I learned felt like adding one more brick to something solid, something that was finally mine. People at work began to notice small things. The way I handled customers. How I stayed calm when everyone else panicked. My manager once said, "You should be running this place." I laughed, but inside, that sentence stayed. It was the first time anyone had suggested I could lead. Meanwhile, Lila's perfect little world began to show cracks. Her engagement fell apart, her job went sideways, and her smile, that flawless, confident smile, started to fade on social media. My mother, of course, acted like nothing had happened, but I noticed. For once, I wasn't the one being pitied. I moved into a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. 4 walls, quiet nights and peace. Something I'd never had before. I'd decorate with thrift store finds, make dinner for one, and play music while reading. And you know what? I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. Then, out of nowhere, an email came from an old contact at the bookstore, a startup company looking for someone part-time to manage their online communications. I said yes before I even finished reading it. It wasn't until the 3rd day of work that I realized Daniel's company name was on the bottom of the email chain. The same Daniel, the same man I hadn't heard from in years. I didn't reach out. I figured it was fate's little joke. Still, being part of something he'd built made me proud in a way I can't explain. His company was growing fast, from a small tech idea to a national brand. And the more I read about his team and his leadership, the more I saw the things we used to talk about in that little bookstore. Kindness, empathy, second chances. It was all there, living proof that maybe I'd left a mark somewhere after all. Around that time, I began mentoring young women online. Simple advice on confidence, writing, starting small businesses. I didn't have a big following, but people listened. They thanked me. Some even said I changed how they saw themselves. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's approval. Lila eventually reached out one evening. She wanted to catch up. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. She looked tired, older, like life had finally caught up to her. She asked how I'd been, what I was doing. When I told her about my small projects, she smiled politely, that old practice smile. I could tell she didn't understand how I could sound content without having everything she once did. And that's when I realized something simple but powerful. Success isn't about applause or status. It's about peace, the kind that no one can give you and no one can take away. Over the years, I built a quiet reputation for helping others find their footing. No spotlight, no stage, just impact. And even though I never heard from Daniel directly, every article about his company reminded me that maybe, just maybe, the belief I once gave him still lived inside his work. I was no longer the ugly, stupid sister. I was someone who had found her strength in silence, her voice in kindness, and her worth in persistence. I had no idea that fate was about to circle back, and that my quiet little world would soon collide with my past in the loudest way imaginable. The invitation came on a random Thursday afternoon, a glossy envelope with gold lettering and my old high school's crest on it. Class of 2010 reunion. I almost laughed. The last time I saw most of those people, I was the invisible one. The girl everyone forgot existed until they needed someone to mock. My first instinct was to throw it away, but something in me hesitated. Maybe curiosity, maybe defiance, maybe I just wanted to see if they'd changed, or if I had. For days, the envelope sat on my kitchen table, staring at me like a dare. Finally, I decided on I was going. Not to prove anything, not to show off, just to walk into that room as myself, without fear. That was the victory. The night of the reunion, the hotel ballroom sparkled like it had been dipped in champagne. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, all the same faces, only older, slightly worn, pretending to be happier than they were. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but I held myself differently now. My heart raced, but my shoulders were straight. The moment people recognized me, I could see the flicker of surprise. Some smiled politely, others whispered. Lila, of course, was already there, center of attention, glowing like always. She spotted me across the room, and for a second her smile faltered. I gave her a small nod and kept walking. People approached me, asked the usual reunion questions. "So what have you been up to? Still writing? Still quiet?" I smiled, gave short answers. They didn't really want to know. They just wanted to compare. I was reaching for a drink when I heard the noise. That sudden collective murmur that ripples through a crowd when someone important walks in. I turned, and there he was. Daniel, taller, sharper, dressed in a sleek gray suit that screamed success. For a moment the air shifted. People gathered around him instantly, like moths to a flame. The same people who wouldn't have given him the time of day years ago. I froze. He looked nothing like the man I'd known back then. The man who used to scribble business ideas on napkins while eating stale sandwiches. But as soon as he smiled, I saw it. That same quiet fire, that same look in his eyes that used to say, "I'll make it count." He was shaking hands, greeting old classmates, when his gaze swept across the room and landed on me. For a moment, it was like everything else went silent. His expression softened, a mix of disbelief and something else. Gratitude, maybe. Recognition. Lila noticed it too. Her eyes darted between us, curious and a little uneasy. "You know him?" she asked, her tone too casual to be casual. I smiled faintly. "A long time ago," I said. "When he wasn't a headline." Dinner started. Laughter filled the room again, and I did my best to blend in. But I could feel Daniel's gaze on me from across the hall. During the speeches, the host announced him as the guest of honor, the man who'd turned a small dream into a multi-million-dollar empire. Applause thundered through the room. My sister clapped extra hard, probably hoping he'd notice her. He took the stage, calm and confident. I expected the usual corporate success story. You know, the hard work pays off speech. But then he said something that made my breath catch. "Before I talk about the company," he began, "I want to talk about the person who made it possible." The room went quiet. Even the servers stopped moving. He scanned the crowd slowly, his eyes stopping right where I sat. And then he smiled. My pulse pounded. My sister leaned forward. "Who's he looking at?" she whispered. And in that moment I realized this wasn't just another speech. This was something else, something no one in that room was prepared for, because the girl they once laughed at was about to become the name on everyone's lips. Daniel took a slow breath, the kind that fills a room before something unforgettable is said. He looked over the crowd, the glittering faces, the forced smiles, and then back at me. "Years ago," he began, "I was broke, hopeless, living out of my car and pretending I had a plan. Everyone I knew had turned their backs. Everyone, except one person. Whispers rippled through the room. People craned their necks, searching for a clue. I could feel Lila's eyes on me, confusion tightening her jaw. Daniel continued, his voice steady, calm, but thick with emotion. She worked in a bookstore. She probably didn't realize what her kindness meant to me. She gave me food when I had none, believed in my ideas when they were nothing but scribbles on scraps of paper. She told me I could still build something, even when I didn't believe it myself. He paused, and in that silence, I could feel my pulse in my throat. Every memory, every moment from those years flashed before me. The rain, the coffee, the tired nights we shared dreaming about what could be. And then he said it. That person is sitting right here tonight. The room went still. Not a breath, not a whisper. He turned toward me, that same quiet fire in his eyes, and said, "Her name is Emma, and tonight I want everyone in this room to know. She was my first mentor." Gasps echoed across the hall. Heads turned, eyes widened. My sister's mouth dropped open. It felt unreal, like the air had thickened around me, and every sound blurred except his voice. He smiled, softer now. You see, everyone talks about success like it's a solo climb, but the truth is, someone always gives you your first step. Emma, you gave me mine. You didn't just believe in me. You taught me what belief looks like, and for that, I owe you everything. Applause erupted. Hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, like a wave crashing over years of silence. People stood. Even the ones who had laughed at me years ago clapped until their palms turned red. I could barely breathe. My throat tightened, my chest burned. I wasn't used to being seen, not like this. Not for something real. Lila's face was pale, frozen in disbelief. She tried to smile, but it came out brittle, cracked. She whispered something to the woman beside her, but her voice trembled. Daniel stepped down from the stage and walked straight toward me. Every step felt slow, deliberate. When he reached me, he didn't say a word. He just extended his hand. The room broke into another round of applause. Cameras flashed. My heart hammered like a drum. I stood still shaking and managed a small smile. "You remembered," I whispered. He leaned closer and said, "How could I forget the only person who believed I could make it?" The words hit me like a weight, not heavy but grounding. Everything I'd ever doubted about myself felt lighter in that moment. He returned to the stage, finished his speech, and the night carried on. But nothing felt the same. People I hadn't spoken to in years came up to me, suddenly remembering my name, my face, my story. Compliments poured in. Shallow, polite, meaningless. But I didn't need them. For once, I wasn't invisible. And when I caught my reflection in one of the mirrored walls, I barely recognized myself. I wasn't the awkward, quiet girl from before. I was the woman who had been underestimated, and finally seen. When the night ended and the lights dimmed, I slipped outside, away from the noise, the congratulations, and the fake smiles. The air was cool, the kind that smells like rain and new beginnings. I stood under the streetlight, watching people leave the hall, their laughter echoing faintly, like ghosts from another life. For years I thought revenge would feel sweet, that proving them wrong would fill the hollow inside me. But standing there, I didn't feel vengeance. I felt peace, because I finally understood. I was never the ugly, stupid sister. I was just the one they couldn't understand. When you're born into a world that praises perfection, being different feels like a curse. But what they call flaws are often just the early stages of strength. My sister had beauty. I had resilience. She had admiration. I had patience. And in the end, patience outlives applause. A few minutes later, Daniel came out, holding 2 cups of coffee, just like the old days. He handed me one and smiled. "I owe you this," he said. I laughed softly. "You don't owe me anything, you just made me remember who I used to be." He nodded. "Maybe that's what real mentors do. They remind us who we are before the world tries to change us. We stood there for a while, two people who had once been invisible, now visible to each other again. The city lights shimmered off the wet pavement, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like life had come full circle. When I got home that night, I looked at an old photo, one from years ago. I was standing behind my sister, half smiling, half hiding. I smiled at it now, not with bitterness but with gratitude, because if it hadn't been for the pain, I wouldn't have grown into the woman who could stand her ground and still be kind. And if you're watching this, maybe you felt invisible too. Maybe someone's made you believe you weren't enough. But listen to me. You are not what they said you were. You are who you decide to become. People forget faces, names, even successes, but they never forget the ones who believed in them. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. So, don't chase their approval. Build your own peace, because one day, when life circles back, they'll see you. Not as the one they mocked, but as the one who rose above it all. And that will be the sweetest kind of revenge.